sustain business growth across generation.
To inspire, influence, and connect family businesses and
The
professionals.
concept of family business has evolved, has been studied, has been sparked.
Dearest Lord, 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 dearest Lord. Teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as I should. To give and not to count the cost. To fight and not to heed the wounds. To toil and not to seek for rest. To labor and ask not for reward. Save that of knowing that I do your most holy will. Dearest Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as I should. To give and not to count the cost. To fight and not to heed the rules. To toil and not to seek for rest. To labor and ask not for reward. Save that of knowing that I do your most holy will.
Welcome to Family Biz TV. This is Jefferson Tew, and I'll be the host this afternoon. Today's topic is the Brave New World Playbook Leading Self-First. I would also want to welcome everyone to the launch event of the Premier Leadership Institute. Our first speaker will discuss about the facets of servant leadership. Our second speaker will discuss thought leadership and why it is important. Before the day ends, our third speaker will summarize why these two core strengths are important and how one can use it to lead others and how to lead oneself. But before we start, I'd like to call on our CEO, Mr. John Ramos, to give the welcome remarks.
I would say good Friday afternoon. I look forward to a fantastic Friday afternoon with all of you learning together. It is very exciting to launch a very important playbook in braving the new and bold world. It is truly an honor to welcome you all. And I'm very, like I said, excited to forge shared learning with all of you today. And we are all blessed to have you, and most of all, share in the virtual stage with our esteemed guests and most sought after speakers who will be speaking with all of us this afternoon. Pandemic or not, It is always our shared mission to influence leaders and build platform for learning to rebuild our new world. We hope to do our part by transforming leadership in Asia one leader at a time. So I'd like to welcome you all to the launch of our executive learning platform where people can gain leadership skills curated and managed by Premier. The value add, of course, is that Premier has been around for the last 10 years, helping people across the industries to thrive in the midst of adversities across generations. Servant leadership emanates from Christ's example by engaging and serving others. Do you agree? Right. This is in contrast to leading by being the boss. It encompasses leadership values like empathy, compassion, grassroots engagement, and value creation. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very excited and honored to welcome you all, especially, with our next speaker, the woman of the hour, one of the nation's icon servant leadership. Please help me welcome no other than Vice President of the Philippines, Leni Robredo. Let's give her a round.
Maayong hapon sa inyong tanan. Congratulations to Premier Family Business Consulting Incorporated on the launch of your Premier Leadership Institute. My warmest greetings as well to all the family business owners, corporate leaders, and members of business and professional organizations joining us today. I hope you are all keeping safe and well. We hold this gathering at a time of great disruption due to COVID-19. Disruption that continues to affect businesses and economies around the world. In 2020, developing Asia suffered its first regional recession in 6 decades, with most major economies posting negative growth. Even the most established businesses are struggling to stay afloat. Unemployment in the country has reached its highest rate on record, and many Filipinos are barely making ends meet. The inequality gap continues to widen, and those in the margins are bearing the brunt of the impact. It therefore gives me great comfort to see that despite the many challenges, you have not allowed fear and uncertainty to paralyze you. Here you are instead, continuing to explore ways to be better servant leaders. This is important because one thing we learned from the pandemic is that servant leadership that is oriented towards the last, the least, and the lost, could spell the difference between life and death. What does it mean to be a servant leader, especially during these times? I am fortunate to have met many servant leaders in my experience in alternative lawyering, in Congress, and now at the Office of the Vice President. From what I have seen, a servant leader is someone who proactively looks for ways to make society fairer, more humane, and more just. Someone who can bring people together, despite their differences, towards a single moral north. In government, this kind of leadership is rooted in the recognition that we all have a stake in governance, because the policies, decisions, and strategies we implement affect us all. It is the servant leader's duty to expand circles of involvement, to inspire participation, to foster collaboration. The key to this endeavor is empathy, in understanding that we all have rights and dignity, that we all have a duty to each other, that we should all have the power to chart our own futures. This is the kind of character needed not only in the highest seats of government, but also in our own industries and in our own communities. I know many of you are already guided by the same principles. Our task now is to find more of us to do the work, more of us to rise to the moment, more of us to widen the path for others to follow. Together, I know we can lead the country to a truly better normal, a world that is better and fairer, and where we can all thrive and prosper. Again, congratulations on a successful launch. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you, Vice President Robredo. We're truly honored to have you join us in this launch. Thank you for your insights and servant leadership oriented towards the last, the least, and the lost, and how it points to a single moral north. Thought leadership challenges us to think beyond the status quo, to be strategic thinkers and leaders who leapfrog from the current reality to the realm of possibility. Without further ado, let me introduce to you the second speaker. He is the fourth president of the prestigious University of Asia and the Pacific. His extensive experience and research in the field as an economist, business strategist, and business sustainability economist makes our speaker a sought after expert by industry associations, policymakers, and companies for their industry policy, corporate strategy, and business sustainability practices. He sits in the board of non-government organizations that promote good governance and education for the less privileged. He is a founding member of the Center for Excellence in Governance, an umbrella organization that oversees other non-for-profit good governance outfits, namely the Institute for Solidarity Asia, the Institute of Direct, the Center for School Governance, and Center for Family Governance. He is also a board member of the Center for Research and Communications Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Winston Padojinog.
Through a powerful combination of liberal arts education and professional specialization, the University of Asia and the Pacific puts due emphasis on the individual, the family, the community, and the Asia-Pacific region.
The distinctive approach to learning has made UANP all that it is today in such a short time. A school environment conducive for study, experienced and dedicated teachers, an excellent faculty-to-student ratio, well-maintained facilities.
The private not-for-profit institute has only been around for 2 decades, yet UANP has already grown into its own as one of the top schools in the country.
Our mission is to fully develop everything that is human in the individual, whole person education.
UANP is committed to the inculcation of time-tested human values and attitudes, and our academic programs include courses in social and professional ethics.
With UANP's brand of whole person education, amidst a working climate where adaptability is key, we stand firm, knowing that every facet of what we have learned can be fully utilized to catch up to the speed of life.
Unique to our university, our mentoring program, augmented by our deep appreciation for the liberal arts, nourishes the development of each of our students and brings the integration of knowledge, skills, and values down to the personal level.
By treating students as individuals, through focused one-on-one sessions with qualified mentors, we put into practice our belief that higher education should be a singular, meaningful experience that develops the person in every aspect.
This holistic approach prepares UANP's diverse community of students from all over the world to become innovative and globally relevant professionals at the top of their field, wherever they may be.
While we are constantly looking towards the future, we never lose sight of who we are. With the UANP motto, Unitas.
We remind ourselves of our desire to achieve unity in many aspects. Unity within university community, unity between faith and reason, unity between religion and life. It reflects the commitment of everyone in UNP toward the pursuit of wisdom, a synthesis, and therefore a unity of life.
uh, Her Excellency, Vice President Leni Robredo, my co-speaker, Dr. Rene Paquibut, and a close friend of mine, Mr. John Ramos, CEO of this new group that is being launched, Premier Leadership Academy, and to everyone present here today. I will share with you my viewpoint on how to be a thought leader in these present times. Of course, the times are different these days, and given these times of uncertainty, actually is also a time of new ideas, new thinking, and how does a leader thrive under these present circumstances. So, before I proceed, I just like to ask the participants here present in this forum 3 questions, and I would like to request all of you to answer the questions on the chat box provided to you by the organizers. First question I would like to ask you is this: what are your feelings and emotions in the new normal? I would really appreciate to see some of your answers in the chat box provided. And from there, let me see. Anxious, yes. I can see that both anxiety, anxious, and hopeful, stressed, worried, obviously. Some are very disappointed. Very good. And it's normal to go deep into those feelings. Stressed, apprehensive, exhausted. At the same time, trusting to God. This time, spending more time in computers. And of course, uncertainty and fear, like being scared, is normal. And of course, we keep on fluctuating, meaning our ideas keep on having to change to the times, and it can be quite discomforting for many of us. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. I have a second question for those especially leading some organizations. The next question I would like to ask you, if you are aware of this, what are the feelings and emotions of your people, especially if you are a person of responsibility, of your people during the new normal? Can you please share with me some of your thoughts? What you think are the feelings and emotions of the people close to you in your place of work? Afraid? Okay, they're becoming engaged. They are also scared, just like all of us, and struggling. Coping, yes. Many are very worried. Some are curious, mixed, but dominantly anxious. Very normal feeling to feel these days. Others feel isolated. That's why we have some pressures on mental health. Apprehensive. Others are bored and worried and adjusting. They also express their uncertainty, their fear of the future. And I think all of these feelings and emotions that we expect from others are not far from the what we feel as well as individuals, as persons. And it's very important these days, as introduced earlier, the need for empathy, to be really aware of these feelings and emotions. And these feelings and emotions are key later to what I believe is a requirement to thought leadership. Now, last question before I like to delve into the matter, but this time based on your answers. Last question. In this context, when you have these feelings and emotions of your people paired with your own feelings and emotions, what are some of the leadership competencies that are necessary in the new future or maybe in the new normal? Can you also share with me in the chat box? Communication is very important. Yes, I agree. The need for resiliency, call for innovation, the need for flexibility, the need to care for others. Very patient at this time because transformation is not overnight. You need to be inspiring, empathetic. You need to be calm, brave. You need to influence, curiosity, sense of childhood curiosity. At the same time, keeping an open mind to many of the changes before us. Thank you so much for this ideas. Very creative. Yes, at this point, we need to be creative. No? Now, with all of these questions that I have posted and the answers you have shared, let me now bring all together these feelings that we have and the feelings of the others in the need to lead people. First, it is very important to see how a thought leader must be performing or how a thought leader should be in the new future. And this is how my take is on the issue. Four important components. First, the capacity of the leader, the process to influence people, and influence them to pursue a common purpose. It is possible to have capacity and process to influence, but no following. It's possible. But we need to let them pursue a common purpose, and in the context of your answers earlier, a changing landscape. Now, a thought leader in a period of uncertainty, volatility, complexity, and ambiguity. So let's delve on each component: capacity, process to influence, purpose to pursue a common purpose, and the changing landscape. Well, don't forget, I am an academician, so I will present this given the time provided us to share with you my thoughts on thought leadership. It's very important to first understand who we are as leaders. If you want to be a thought leader, the thought leader must be able to understand his capabilities. A good self-examination leads to good self-understanding, and with that good self-understanding, self-management is key. That is important as a component because you need to influence people. All of us work through people in order to achieve certain objectives or pursue common goals or a mission. So the process is very important these days. Not only the capability of the leader, but the process. And finally, process to bring people to a common purpose. In this period of uncertainty, it's very important for the leader to give people meaning. We cannot just redound perhaps to operational targets like having sufficient bottom line to make the payroll, for example, meet overheads. It has to go beyond that. It has to give meaning to people's lives. The search for meaning at this point of uncertainty remains very important. You and I are human beings. While the world around us is changing, you and I need to have something like an anchor in order to move forward. Just think of a ship. A ship needs the sails, and the sails need to be fixed before the ship can move. So that sail should be very sturdy, an anchor. In this case, meaning. And finally, the context, which is changing at this point. So these are the topics I would like to cover in the next 15 minutes of my discussion on thought leadership in the context of a changing world, in the context of anxiety, in the context of ambiguity, complexity, and uncertainty, in volatility. They call VUCA, VUCA, very popular word these days. Let me now dwell first on the leader. You as leaders, perhaps. By the way, let's talk about the landscape. What is happening to the landscape? Before we dwell to the leader, I have certain what we call factors that drive changes in the landscape. I refer to them as megatrends. And let me share with you these megatrends very briefly because we do not have much time to elaborate on them, but I'm almost sure you will be able to agree with me on these trends. Definitely the shift to digitization. It has accelerated while the world was moving towards that. The digitization was accelerated when the pandemic struck the whole global community. So all of us, this digitization is creating so much disruption in many sectors of society, including education. I'm sure your work at this point is either benefiting from digitization or moving towards that, or your business models are being appended by the need to transform it towards digitization. We have to admit what is happening now is stakeholder activism. They are not just interested with products alone. Many of the stakeholders these days would like to see positive impact. What is your contribution to, as the Vice President said, alleviating poverty? Another one is, what do you do about the environment? What is your carbon footprint? What is your impact to the environment? Many things. How about human rights? How about inclusiveness? So again, this stakeholder activism is also adding to the fuel of changes that is happening in the landscape. Urbanization and aging. In the Philippines, as of 2018, already 51% of our population has moved towards urban areas. It is projected that by 2030, almost 60% of many economies will have their population in urban centers, and that will also create another set of disruption as well. Well, a large swath of the world is also facing aging. Aging is putting pressure on social security of those countries, also pushing pressure on health in other economies as well. That explains, if you ask me, that explains the deployment of our OFWs will continue to be sustained forever and ever, because these many countries will need our health workers. We just have to admit that the demand for health workers will continue. The rise of the Asian century, well, it was the American century in the 20th century. The 21st century will be the Asian century. And there's a lot of concentration of economic activity in this part of the world. Many capital, many people, many goods and services and investments will flooding this part of the globe. That will also create its own disruption. And finally, the global protocols. This point, capital will be determined by so many factors beyond profitability. Companies or investors will look at your environmental, social, and governance scorecards before they start moving their funds or even buying your products or availing of your services. So these are some of the drivers of change that a thought leader must be able to thrive or evolve from. So with this complex landscape, let's go to the next protagonist here in thought leadership, the leader himself or herself. What is very important here is before self-management, there is self-knowledge. We cannot fully manage ourselves until we'll be able to manage, to have a good understanding of ourselves. Next is the change in mindset. More and more, as you have seen here, flexibility, for example, calls for a change in mindset. It is happening that skill sets will not be as important as it was in the past, but in this case of world of disruption and changes and transformation, mindset is very important. I will elaborate on that on the next discussion. The capacity for balance. I will elaborate on that. No? The leader cannot be purely an expert on one field. A thought leader must be able to have a capacity for balance. I will elaborate on each of these items as we go along. So self-knowledge and self-mastery is very important. In this case, in this time of pandemic, the first thing that must come to mind to us, to a leader who is a thought leader, for example, must be the awareness of his limits or her limits. No one has the answer to all of these problems, to all of the concerns that is needed, for example, in transformation. A leader must be aware of his limits, that he can only do so much, she can only do so much, and can go only so far. So it's a very important component for leaders at this point. They have to be aware that they are vulnerable, meaning in this point of transformation, there are many experimentation and toleration for failures. There will be a lot of projects that may be tried, a lot of tactics and strategies, but one has to be ready for vulnerability. Meaning, one can also fail. As they said in this period, fail fast, learn fast. And finally, the leader must also be aware of his or her potential. What? As I have seen in the answers earlier, the potential for change. We cannot continue thinking the same way. We have to open our mind, as you have answered in our chat box earlier. Now, this new mindset for the new setting is very important because there is a shift now in the requirements that is needed, skill sets for leaders. From aptitude, what we can do, to attitude, how we perceive events, life, and people. And from skill sets to mindsets. Before, some of you can recall the lessons that you have learned in schools and the skills that you have acquired. I don't think some of them are already relevant at this point. What is key, as some of you may have already identified, the need to revisit our mindset. Our mindset is the openness to anything that will come our way. As some of you have identified, this leader must be more engaging. And as you may have experienced in the earlier presentation of our university, there is a need to combine two things, the humanities and the sciences together. Unfortunately, a lot of educational curriculum has been focused heavily on specialization. And much of this specialization can easily be replaced by artificial intelligence and robots. And that means there's a need for value adding. That's where the humanities, the liberal arts come in. That's where history, the arts, the literature, and philosophy comes very handy. Because in the future, the work that will be needed will be high-value work, because intelligent machines will replace those work that are repetitive, low-value, and structured work. So time to rethink that there are certain jobs that machines will be able to replace. You have already seen that. No? Some of the low-value work in the BPOs have been replaced by artificial intelligence. You have seen some legal work and some accounting work, even auditing, done, since everything is done already digitally, done by machines, not just based on samples. Let's say when we audit, not just based on samples, but by auditing, 100% auditing. So, as they have said in the last forum, 65% of children entering primary school today will ultimately end up working in job types that don't exist today. So, the capacity for balance, the final attribute for a leader in this new world. First, yes, you may have expertise, but at the same time, balance it with flexibility. You need others. You must be able to deal with complexity, but when you start communicating, you better communicate with clarity that people understand. You can be tactical in order to solve many day-to-day operations, not forgetting that you need also to look beyond that, strategic. You can be able to work short-term while not losing sight of the long-term. You can be very decisive in many matters of decisions, no? And yet, at the same time, iterative, meaning willing to try, try and try. So decisive, decide on one thing. It's not improving, then we improve again. It's not working, let's go back to the drawing board and try it again. And finally, empathy. While we may have empathy, we should not also forget the need for firmness. That everyone must also be responsible. Hey, this is just some of the balancing act that needs to be needed, that a thought leader must be able to consider in the near future. And finally, the process of influencing people, getting things done through people, and we need to borrow from design thinking. This is the framework of design thinking. What we do is must be able to begin with empathy. That's where the thought leaders, many of the thought leaders, if you study them, they were able to empathize on the difficulties that people face. For example, the developer or the one who, Hastings, introduced Netflix because he was fined when he was delayed in returning back the CD that he rented out, video rental that he rented out in Blockbuster, so he was penalized. And with that, he realized that it is the same predicament of the others. From there, he started defining the problem, came up with an idea, willing to try it, create the prototype, and test it. So this is the process by which everyone else should also work through people. They must be able to empathize, define, ideate, prototype, try it, and test it. You can actually see the ideas that they come about, but sometimes these ideas, when they are tested, they are not working. That's why some of the applications that we have patches. They send patches to correct it because they saw problems. And then test it again. And then try to see if you will be able to rework again on your idea, rework again on the prototype until you are able to address the issue that you have identified or defined in your process. And finally, adjusting to the environment, because the environment is changing, we must elicit not only empathy, but trust. Trust. Every time we lead people, they are sure that we can be trusted. Trusted is, calls for vulnerability. People become vulnerable because by doing so, they will be able to achieve a greater good. That's why when spouses are together, each have to trust each other, because by doing so, they become better. The same thing for any business. If there is trust in the business, it is going to also prosper. As they said, if there is trust, the more trust there are, the lesser will be the less thick will be the documents, no, that is between two parties. And then communication and coordination, especially in a blended environment. Everything is digital, and sometimes there will be a call for face-to-face. They have to be capable on working along that line. And then you will be able to come up with a design or redesign your organization or your business processes or whatever is necessary in order to achieve or come up with those ideas that you have generated when you were defining the problem. And then willing to experiment. This is a period of uncertainty, and no one can really be certain about their activities and the outcome of their activities, and yet they're willing to try it. Experimentation. And finally, the capacity to implement, the execution. So if you look at it, a thought leader has to go through certain, especially in the new normal, certain what we call competencies, that gives him the capacity and the process to influence people, to influence them to pursue a common purpose, to give them meaning amidst a changing landscape. And that, I suppose, will end my ideas on thought leadership in this brave new world playbook, the new future. Thank you so much, and have a pleasant day to everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dr. Padojinog, for that very insightful talk. It is true that as leaders, we have to be aware of this changing environment, our own capacities, and the feelings and emotions of the people that we lead. It's true that if we face anxiety as leaders, these anxieties may be the same things that our employees are actually facing. So now allow me to introduce our third speaker. He is the academic director of the Premier Leadership Institute. He was instrumental in the curation of the dual concepts of both thought leadership and servant leadership for the programs of PLI. Please join me in welcoming our third speaker, Dr. Rene Paquibut.
The business world is changing, but beyond the new normal are new possibilities.
Do you aspire to be your team's leader, but you're not equipped with sufficient experience and knowledge to motivate cooperation and productivity in your team?
Do you find yourself wanting to improve and unlock new leadership opportunities? Because you feel like you can do more, but you just don't know if you're ready enough to take on new challenges.
Have you ever thought this pandemic would breed an entirely new class of leaders? Because of this pandemic, most are compelled to go digital while having to adapt to quick changes in the workplace. But it's easy to get lost amidst challenges in a fast-paced environment.
Do you feel stuck with traditional management tools that are no longer working with young achieving leaders or your company's vision and mission, traditional management might be suffocating and confusing for today's generation, and it would no longer align with the goals that the company wants to achieve.
Premier Leadership Institute is now the newest forefront of global resource, leading the emergence of thought and servant leadership. PLI is a training ground for the young and digital generation where you can achieve your conquest for excellent leadership and management education. PLI provides a quality and globally curated curriculum for the next generation of leaders and managers, delivered creatively and experientially in a digital platform. And the best part is, you will automatically be a member of the thoughtful servant leadership community of practice.
We'd love to guide you climb your dream ladder of success as a powerful leader.
With PLI,
you're always a step higher.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you're all comfortable where you are. Before anything else, I'd like to maybe give you a little bit of information about myself. Aside from that, I am the designated academic director of the Premier Leadership Institute. Just for your information, I am currently based in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE. I am also an academician, just like Dr. Winston. And I am currently an associate professor at the Al Ain University here in the College of Business. And of course, prior to that, I was with the University of San Carlos for a long time before I decided to move over here. Earlier, John introduced me, mentioned that the speakers are sought after speakers, but I don't think that I qualify. I qualify, but just the same, I'd like to give what I can, and I'm tasked this afternoon to synthesize and to also provide a better context of why the Premier Leadership Institute exists and what for. Before I do that, I'd like to start by introducing the topics that I'm going to discuss. If my PowerPoint slide will be shown now. So if you see, I want the theory of leadership to be linked to performance. In other words, I hope that we will be able to really bring down these concepts on the ground and translate this into results, because I think that that's essentially what we want. Yeah, that these leadership theories, are transformed into behavior that produce the kind of result that we want for our society, even for ourselves, for our businesses, for our industry. So the next slide will show you how I tried to organize this. So I'm going to start, of course, by sharing with you the theories of leadership. I'm not going to be taking up the whole day, of course. If you're going to study leadership, if you just Google it, you can be directed to 1,000 resources, and at the end of the day, what do you really take out of it? And then, but essentially, what I want to do here in a few minutes is to marry two concepts together. We were Dr. Winston talked about thought leadership, and then the Vice President Leni introduced the idea of servant leadership. And there is a very good reason why we are highlighting these two concepts, because these are actually the foundation of the establishment of the Premier Leadership Institute. So I am going to integrate these two concepts, and we are going to discuss it as leadership as philosophy. I'm going to talk about leadership as competency, leadership in change, and then finally we will I hope to bring home the point that leadership must produce results. So in the next slide we will see that the study of leadership, literature on leadership, do not really agree on one universal definition. We can read about so many kinds of leadership. In fact, the first theory of leadership was what is called as a great man theory. In the past, they thought that leaders are born, that that leaders are not made, that leaders are born with the right traits and the ability of leading, and that when you are born you have it. But that was the original thought. But the study of leadership realized, of course, that it is not so. Although the trait theories, this literature will also tell us that even if we recognize that leaders are not born, there are in fact attributes or characteristics that are shared by effective leaders. So the study of different leaders, they were able to identify certain attributes that are common to effective leaders. Yeah, but also as we continue to study leadership, realize that traits are not enough to define who the leader is. Leaders also can be observed in terms of their behavior. So you have also a set of theories defining leaders in terms of their behavior. Like for example, leaders must have certain technical skills, certain human skills, certain conceptual skills. But again, it is not enough. We have to put the leader in a context, how the leader actually behaves in situations, how the leader rise in certain situation. Do we need leaders every day, or do we need leaders only in times when there's change occurring? And we know that this time is really that time. In other words, the study of leadership can be, in the next slide, can be integrated, I think, into three questions. If we are going to define the leader, we can define the leader in terms of who the leader is, that is his traits. We can also define the leaders in terms of his behavior, what he does. And then we can also define the leader in terms of when his leadership or her leadership actually occur. What are the situations that require leadership? So if we are going to integrate all of the literature on leadership, we can actually come down to these questions. So if we are going to ask these questions and we're going to answer these questions about a leader, then we shall have described him more comprehensively, more completely. So I'd like to go to the first question and see if I can define who the leader is. In the next slide. Before I start talking about thought leadership and servant leadership, I'd like to maybe just a very simple statement is that a leader is a leader because people follow the leader. If you don't have any followers, you are not a leader. So a leader is someone people follow. Yeah, and of course, people have many reasons for following someone, and generally, we can even say that when you like someone, when you admire someone for his ideas, for his behavior, uh, we are probably going to follow the leader. We are not going to follow someone we don't like. We are not going to follow someone we admire. So what is the core then of the leader's person? And I believe that a leader needs to have a philosophy. And if we all want to be leaders, at the end of the day, it is not the philosophy of other leaders that we want to have. It is building our own philosophy as leader. What is a philosophy? It is your explanation. This is your philosophy explains why you have to behave a certain way. A philosophy explains why you are making a certain decision based on many options. Your philosophy will justify your action. And therefore, I think what we need to really do is find our own philosophy as individuals. And there are so many literature that you can find, but at the end of the day, it is what you value and what you believe that will matter in your own leadership. Thought leadership and servant leadership, in my mind, are inputs for philosophy. Yeah, inputs for your philosophy. The vice president focused on a certain quality of a servant leader. A servant leader is someone who is selfless, who does not think of his or her own interests, but puts the interest of others. Yeah, and we hope in the Premier Leadership Institute, we hope that our leaders would have this in their as their philosophy, that they are there for others, that they care for the well-being of other people, that they are selfless, that they listen to what people actually need, that they are concerned about what is good for people. And on the other hand, you have also the thought leadership, which focuses on leadership in thought. That thought leadership, I think, basically is leading people to think. What is in our thoughts? Our thoughts, we have ideas in our thoughts. A thought leader is somebody who is constantly learning from the different aspects of his life, his experience, and then he has a different way of thinking. He puts things together, providing a different perspective. He takes the risk of actually communicating these ideas to others, and tries to convince people that this idea is better. And I think that if we combine these two together and become part of our philosophy, that we value creativity, we value innovativeness, we value taking risks, we value, but most importantly, all this is oriented towards making a better business, making a better country, making a better world, making people better generally. So in the Premier Leadership Institute, these two philosophies, I'd like to call them, we try to put them together to define who the leader is that we want to nurture, to build, and to support. In fact, I sort of coined the word thoughtful servant leadership as a way to combine these two, because there are just too many labels to leadership. At the end of the day, what really will become performance is what the person believes and what the person values about leadership. So if you believe that the ideal leader is someone who is creative, who initiates thinking about how to improve things. If you believe that leaders should be putting the interest of people in front and working towards that, then you are all thoughtful leaders. The next slide. So this is what we wanted in Premier Leadership Institute. In fact, the mission of Premier Leadership Institute is to support and inspire the emerging generation of change makers and servant leaders through leadership and management education, but founded on the philosophies of servant leadership and thought leadership. The next slide. In the next slide, I'd like to focus on leadership as competency. Now trying to bring down philosophy into something that is more tangible. What is a competency? And we talk about knowledge, skills, and abilities. Competency, if leadership is a competency, it is a combination of certain knowledge and certain skills and certain abilities that, when combined together, will allow the leader to perform successfully. Because this is, I think, what we all want at the end, to see results from leadership, not just people enjoying the limelight because they are leaders, but that the results themselves speak for their leadership. It's interesting. I'm reading a book now on Grit by Duckworth. I think that's the author. She talks about passion and perseverance more than knowledge, skills, and abilities, which I think is a differentiates leaders. Yeah, whether you are, of course, from the background, we have to think that a leader is from the thought leadership and the servant leadership, and how this becomes the foundation for this competency. So as I said, leadership is competency. Yeah, leadership is competency. It has to become result. It has to become result. But aside from knowledge, skills, and abilities, which as we heard Dr. Winston say, knowledge, skills, and abilities, they can change. But I think what does not change would be your philosophy. What does not change will be your motivation sourced from that philosophy. So you are passionate about helping others. So you are passionate about learning. So you are passionate about creating content, creating ideas, and convincing and persuading other people to change their mind and to accept your ideas. Next slide. In the next slide, I'd like to focus on these two programs now that PLI is offering. Knowledge, skills, and abilities can be taught. In other words, leadership can be taught. And the Premier Leadership Institute has put together these two programs with the view of providing the learner a rich resource that will enhance his or her knowledge and skills and abilities. But what I realize is that you can enhance knowledge, skills, and abilities, but you cannot really teach passion. You cannot really teach perseverance. It all comes from your motivation, from your philosophy. Yeah, if you are passionate about something, that's something that you will have to take care of as an individual. Yeah, so if we hope that if we can convince you that thought leadership and servant leadership are important in this VUCA times, as Dr. Winston said, in this time of change. We invite you to take courses to improve, to enhance your knowledge, your skills and abilities, but most importantly, we want you to have the right motivation, the right from your passion, from your philosophy. Next slide. So in these times of volatility, in these times of uncertainty, in complexity, in ambiguity, we need leaders who can give us a clear vision of the future. So despite and in spite of all this the chaos that we're experiencing, change bring us unstructured problems. Yeah, change bring us unstructured problems. What are unstructured problems? Many of the problems that we are facing now, we have not really faced before, and therefore we find ourselves in situations where we don't know what will be the best way. Thought leaders would be those who will take the risk, who will have the courage to actually think about this, to actually learn more about this, and to offer solutions to unstructured problems. And when you offer solutions to unstructured problems, you end up with the possibility that you will actually fail in these solutions. And that's why the thought leader is somebody who takes a lot of courage, because he knows that there is a possibility of failure, who really knows exactly how to navigate in times of change. If you want change, you have to create the change. You have to be the change. This is what we want for our leaders. Thought leaders and servant leaders are the change that they want to happen. They put themselves forward and they become the example of the change that they want to happen. They also do their best to create a culture based on shared values. They will not force anybody. A servant leader and a thought leader will not force anyone, but will try to convince them, will try to persuade them, to share the same values. And especially the servant leader who is very emotionally connected to people. The servant leader is someone who is emotionally connected to people. She or he is very aware about what people are feeling. And he or she does not use position of power. And that means that we can all be leaders, even if we are not manager, even if we are not vice president, we are not CEO. We can all become leaders using our personal power. And what will be the source of that power? I think the source of that power will be your passion. The source of that power will be your perseverance. The source of that power will be your competency, which we can all actually work for. Yes, the next slide, please. I'm going to be finished in, yes. Okay. So just like what the Dr. Winston did earlier, I have here also a sentence that will in other words, summarize what leadership is as performance. A leader in a given situation engages in behaviors that produce results. This is what leadership is as performance. So we learned that a leader is somebody who has traits. A leader is someone who has the philosophy, and we want the leader to incorporate thought leadership and servant leadership as philosophy. Now, given that philosophy, the leader will be in a context, in a situation. And this situation now is a situation of change. And this situation requires thought leadership. This situation requires servant leadership. In situations of change, I have to say this, in situations of change, just like the pandemic that we just experienced, we leave dead bodies behind. When we make our choices as leaders in business, we leave bodies behind. But if you are someone who espouses servant leadership, you will not want dead bodies behind. You want everyone to be able to survive. You want everyone to be able to transition, to to overcome the change. So a leader is in a situation of change, and he or she engages in behaviors. He makes choices. He acts. He acts on the issues. He acts on the problems, and he wants to produce results. Now, what are these results? These results are exactly the results that he envisioned in the first place, or she envisioned in the first place. A better business, a better industry, a better country, a better people as result. So we can judge. I think we can judge the leader in the results that he produces, and I think that results should speak louder than anything else. A leader doesn't have to say so much, but a leader can show results, and we will know that he is a leader. And I think there's a last slide now I'd like to share. Knowledge, we can all work towards improving our knowledge. We can all work towards improving our skills. We can all work towards improving our abilities. Yeah. But motivation is something that will have to be a personal responsibility. What moves you, what drives you is something that you will have to take care of yourself. And in the Premier Leadership Institute, we would like to promote thought leadership and servant leadership as foundation of your leadership, that you will think of the welfare of people, that you put the interest of people more than your own, that you will be selfless, that you will be driven by a vision of a better business, a better industry, a better world, a better society. And if that is going to move you, you can survive. Knowledge, skills, and abilities are easy to acquire, and the Premier Leadership Institute is providing that opportunity, that platform. But apart from that, we want you to become part of a community of practice where we can all motivate each other. That we can make this as a movement, a thoughtful servant leadership, a movement that will change the lives of the people in our businesses, that will change our industry, and that will change the world. And with that, I thank you for your patience. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paquibut, for your insights on thoughtful servant leadership. At this point, we will have a short Q&A session. Due to pressing matters, Vice President Robredo could not join us. In any case, I would like to call back Dr. Padojinog, PLI CEO John Ramos, and Dr. Paquibut. For the audience, if you have questions, you can actually put them in the chat box, and we will try to screen them. So my first question is for Dr. Padojinog. Viktor Frankl wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, and in his book, he was basically saying that if you know what the meaning is in your life, then you can go through all sorts of difficulties. Now, and you mentioned in your talk about the finding meaning is also very important. As a leader who leads a lot of employees or a lot of people, what are some of the concrete steps, or how can we actually help our employees find meaning in their work in relation to their performance in the company?
Okay, there are very many 1,001 examples by which executives will be able to impart meaning into the work of their employees. First and foremost is very basic thing, just to think about the other co-employees that they have. In a period of like the period of pandemic, they must be able to see a leader who cares for his people. When somebody gets sick, for example, there is a lot of support uh, given to them by the colleagues and employees. Some accommodations are made by the company when catastrophe like natural calamities like a typhoon, everyone else are galvanized, no, to mobilize and to assist. That's one of the main examples I have. Another one is to make employees aware of the impact of what they're doing. For example, that that the businesses that they have, the fence line communities that they have, should, as much as possible, benefit from their operations. How many businesses these days play a critical role in ensuring that the community around them, for example, get also to participate in the prosperity of the organization? I have very many examples. No? I know of one that instead of buying uniforms from Manila, for example, they would rather mobilize the households in the community and train the mothers to prepare to do the uniforms of the staff. So, and people, when people see the impacts, as Professor Paquibut would say, the results, and these results impact people, especially the Generation Z. This Generation Z that is going to dominate the consumer markets in 2030, these are people that are social activists. No? These are people who would like to change the world. They want to see that they have an impact. And that's where meaning comes in. Meaning does not come from somebody else's own personal success. It's not really that. The true meaning is when they see their impact, no, on others. No? Especially when it has improved the lot of so many people. No? They see that their work has a purpose, no? That it has helped somebody else. There are many, 1,001 examples I can cite, and many of them can do that. And all of us as well, we must be capable of finding the meaning behind of what we do. As Professor Paquibut said earlier, you don't even need a structure in order to be a leader. To be a vice president, you don't need to be a vice president or a president in order to influence people and to people to follow you. Example, a good book writer like Frankel did not have any organization, but he was able to influence people. In fact, with that definition, he was able to give positive impact on these people, give them meaning as well. The same thing for, I have to say, a housewife. A housewife can actually be a leader at her home. Of course, I'm not referring only his leadership role in the household, especially for over their husbands. Anyway, but they can influence their children. They can influence their relatives. No? Because by their good work that they do, they find meaning in what they do at home. They can actually household wives, for example, can actually be virtual leaders at their home. They can influence people, no? Their children in particular, their husband, is because the care that they do in their work. They find meaning in cleaning the house or tutoring the children, spending time with them, no? etc. So it's very varied. But what is important is if we cannot find meaning in what we do, we will be unhappy. It's going to be very, very difficult to persevere in this environment that we are currently facing.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Padojinog. I mean, true, with this difficulty, if we find meaning, then we can definitely overcome what we are doing, um, or experiencing. This next question goes to both Dr. Padojinog and Dr. Pakibot. I think that there's already over the years there's been a change and of results. Like there's a greater emphasis to these environmental social governance scorecards, emphasis on the triple bottom line, people, profit, the planet. Um, what I mean, and as a leader, we have to be aware of such changes, and you know what are the as Dr. Winston mentioned that the stockholders are looking for. What's actually prompting this change, uh, and are we ready? I mean, as the companies here in the Philippines ready for such changes? Dr. Padojinog, let's start with you.
Yes, I'd like to say that UANP has been in the forefront of sustainability reporting. We have encouraged companies to report not only their performance, but their impact. So if some of you belong to listed companies and you need to disclose your sustainability impact, sustainability reports, that to a large extent, our university, through our Center for Social Responsibility, played a very critical role there. That's absolutely true because the movement of capital will now be more and more be determined by the ESGs, the environment, social, and governance scorecard. They call it the ESGs. The movement of your goods and services, more and more companies will ask, uh, are you paying the right wages to your labor? Are you complying with the rules of the labor laws of your country? There's no childhood labor. There is no discrimination. That's also a requirement now of many countries, even here, other states. So it's becoming a movement. Actually, that's what I said earlier. One of the global trends, and it's very important, is global protocols, and that's what I'm particularly referring to. These global protocols are imposing on companies not only to perform, to deliver results, but to have positive impact. They need to make sure that a protocol means a way of behaving in order to be welcome. That's a protocol. More and more of those protocols are being signed. So the climate change protocol, the SDGs, for example, is a protocol that the Philippines is a signatory. Other companies are following several reporting protocols using GRI, Global Reporting Initiative protocols. They are also using IR standards, integrated reporting protocols. It is a movement and it is inevitable. As I have said, it's a mega trend that it's forcing companies to transform, that they need to revisit even many aspects, including their supply chain. They have to make sure that their supply chain is green, for example. You cannot anymore say that you may have outsourced your oil tanker to a contractor and then the oil got spilled and you cannot just say it's the fault of the contractor. No, you cannot do that anymore. Even the company that may have contracted that oil that got spilled is also responsible. So uh, it's different these days. So the movement of capital, the movement of labor, the movement of goods and services, to some extent, if we want to trade with the rest of the world, we have to meet these global protocols, these ESGs. It's a mega trend that is inevitable.
Thank you for that question, Jeff. If you trace back the evolution of management before the 1950s, the management philosophy was, how can I make more money? This was the motivation. You go into business because you want to make more money. So the profit centeredness of the philosophy uh, created all these results. Yeah, these results that we find are very devastating. If you trace back the history of servant leadership, it is actually it can be associated with one person. His name was Greenleaf. The reason why he started the servant leadership movement was was because he saw the result of the management philosophy in the past. So the philosophy has changed precisely because the results were not good. We're not good for people. We're not good for the environment. And so the movement of servant leadership is shifting the focus, not on profit, but on the well-being of people and the well-being of the environment. And this has become a movement. I think that should be the case, that we need to be critical of results, and we need to offer better solutions. This is what thought leadership is about. But solutions that are directed at improving the welfare of people, improving the welfare of the environment, improving the world in general. Although, as an aside, I think I wonder if we still have time to reverse the results of the old management philosophy. But it's quite challenging now. We're talking of sustainability, we're talking of corporate social responsibility, we're talking of ethical business, all because we realize that the management philosophy in the last many years have not made us a better world.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rene. We actually have a question from the audience, Leo Hapitana. Um, in your talk, you said knowledge plus motivation equals performance. This is for Dr. Rene. How do you keep the motivation high of every employee in order for them to perform at their best without necessarily giving rewards?
Motivation. I think I'd like to attempt to answer that question by bringing in what Dr. Winston mentioned in his talk, in sense meaning, or making meaning making. And I think that if you are a manager, you should talk to your people, because that is also what servant leadership is about. You listen to people, you talk to them, you become aware of their emotions, their feelings, you accompany them through that process. uh, Help them find meaning even in the difficult times, especially I think during the difficult times. Making them realize that these experiences we need to go through as a source of learning. We grow from this. We learn from this. This is also what essentially is thought leadership. That we learn from the experience and that you communicate that. It's a big responsibility for the manager. It is, in fact, a duty of the manager to constantly motivate people. If people are down, if people have low morale, it is the responsibility of the manager to uplift that. And so I am putting a lot of weight on the shoulder of the manager as leader, of the manager as leader.
Thank you very much, Doc Rene. And of course, communication is so important because what we may perceive to be rewards may not always be rewarding to the employees. I'd like to encourage everyone to put their questions in the chat box. I have a question for Dr. Padojinog. This is from the chat box. Do you think the Philippines will follow this green movement? And if so, do you think it would be soon in the short term, or we can see that change quite a while for Filipinos?
Of course, I have to distinguish between the green movement as an ideology, which I don't espouse, meaning ideology, meaning they put environment over people. No? The object of development is still people. Sometimes the others will use environmental issues to, let's say, espouse population control through abortions, through that's not the kind of green I suppose you're referring to. The green movement I think you're referring to, I believe, are those people who are now more and more concerned about the preservation and the uh, uh, protection of the environment. That's I think what you're referring to. Well, if you look at the recent trends in consumer spending, many of the Gen Zs, for example, are already asking questions about the impact or the responsibility of companies to their products. That means the obligation of a company to its products does not end after a transaction has been closed. How the consumer will dispose the packaging and how the packaging will be recycled and used later is still part of the responsibility of the company. The thing is, it is really moving towards there. Many of the companies here in the Philippines are moving towards there. For example, this movement towards renewable energy is picking up very fast simply because there are companies, very specific companies, that would like an option in terms of sourcing the supply of their energy. So if they like to tap renewable energy instead of fossil-based energy, like coal, for example, they would opt and choose renewable energy. That is why there's a transformation right now happening in our energy sector. This impact on the green movement is already more or less directly or indirectly imposed on publicly listed companies. They have to disclose their sustainability impacts. So if you are a listed company, you need to include in your annual reports a sustainability report, which includes an impact on your the business's impact on the environment. By 2022, the banks are required to report also their sustainability impacts. For example, they have to ask, to whom do you lend your money to? For example, do you know your customers, where they source their incomes, source their funds? These are critical trends that are happening. Where do your loans go to? Do they contribute to the preservation of the environment, the protection of the environment, of economic activities that you fund? That will also be a requirement among the requirements in 2022 for banks. So I think it has already arrived and it's already causing a transformation. So I have to alert, I think it's Teresa asking, it has already arrived. So there are many companies like AE Energy, Ayala Energy Corporation has practically unloaded all its coal-based operations in order to focus on renewable energy. And its stock prices tripled last year. So it's picking up and it's becoming a movement, especially after every time a natural calamity hits the nation. Again, the issue about the environment always crops up. So it has arrived. So it will not take a while. It has already arrived.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Winston. I have a question for our three panelists, and we'll start with John. How can the Philippines, I mean, with this landscape, with the current landscape and all the disruptions that are happening, what is the Philippines doing well, and what is the Philippines, what policies maybe we should put in place to minimize disruption or maximize our opportunities during these disruptions?
That's a very interesting question, Jeff. And you know that I'm really very biased in the family business segment of our economy. And we all know that many of the leaders in this segment, this industry, are really needing a lot of support in terms of how they are able to professionalize their families and also, the family owners, also the business. And we all know that leaders really play a vital role in the rise and fall of any organization. And without really, strong support from, the laws that we have in terms of making them really have good representation as a family business uh, uh, the many laws that we have. For example, if I may cite a case, many family businesses really need support in terms of making sure that the motivations, the philosophies that they have that drive them to really to work harder to grow their business, which is to actually pass that family business or that ownership, multi-generationally to their families. And these are things that are not necessarily supported by Philippine laws, and there's no protection in each of these families in business in terms of really acknowledging that they're different. They are not really the same with the others, and that has true meaning and true value of actually giving them support in terms of law. So um, we know that there's chamber of commerce. There's so much of influence that they can do to come up with laws to protect the enterprises, like the micro, small, and medium enterprises. But particularly on family business, I think we need to be able to influence them. That the importance of influence our makers, the importance of really protecting our families in business. This has not yet been done in the Philippines, but this has been successfully, evolved in other progressive countries such as Australia, such as Spain. A lot of these progressive countries are already going down to the level of how they can, protect the core, which is the family, the core of any enterprises, and I'm referring to the family corporation. So how do we protect them is really something that will really fuel more productivity, more economic productivity in that particular sense, so that, with the pandemic going, who will survive? We need to help these family business leaders. And, as they reset and as they try to revisit their business models and, look into their mold of how they actually create their leaders, it is also good to further inspire these leaders that, our Philippine government can take care of them and can protect the kind of hard work that they do in order to help our country.
Thank you very much, John. Well, Dr. Winston has a prior engagement, but he will answer this question. So, and he'll have to leave after the question. Doctor?
Uh, may I ask again, Jeffrey? Uh, Jefferson, was the question again?
Well, in these current times and pandemic, as the Philippines as a nation, what are some things that are in place that are good, or some things that we should have in place, like policies, so that we can overcome or maximize these opportunities and these crises?
Okay, okay. Uh, Let me see first, from before I answer that, let me share with you the adverse impact of the quarantines on the Philippine economy. 2018, we significantly improved our poverty incidence from 22% to 17%. That's about 4 to 5 million Filipinos liberated from poverty. But now we're going back to that level. We're going back to 20% or even 22% poverty incidence. That means those 4 or 5 million that may have found jobs may have lost them again. Second, the unemployment. No? We in 2019 we had record employment at such a high level, never in our history, only to plunge again in 2020. So, with all of these crises, there are several policies that were instituted by government. Now, that I think are very good policies, I have to admit. These are policies that will aim to stimulate economic activity. For example, additional funds for DOH, providing funds to public hospitals, no, so the Bayanihan Fund. There is a pending bill that is on the desk of the government, which is the CREATE bill that will lower down the taxes. And recently, there is a bill that will accelerate the selling of distressed assets of banks just in case they want to form a vehicle and dispose it. And also, unlike other countries, unlike the Western countries, Filipinos are very, very obedient. Hindi pasaway. They tend to follow. That's why there's a lot of question why, despite the archipelagic nature of the Philippines, why the transmission rate, infection rate is very low. Well, they cited three reasons. No? One is that we have the oratio de imparata. That's one. Second is that we have the government policies in place, and then we all follow. And number three, you won't mind, we have a very good healthcare service. There are many frontliners there in the medical care who are willing to take care of the sick people. So they are heroes that we have. So I think after this pandemic, maybe after the lockdown, which for me, 2021 will still be very dismal, which will start, I think, in 2022, when we will see the economy start roaring back again. I think starting on the first half of 2022. There you will see again consumption resurging. No? Usually that's the first one that will surge, no? When we start opening up again more and more of the business enterprises. So that's what I would like to share in terms of the positive things that we have. And I suppose in terms of the marathon, in terms of nations that will recover relatively fast and on a longer term basis, the Philippines is one of them. We have a huge domestic population that can just stimulate our economy when the right time comes. Thank you so much. Thank you, John, for inviting me. I really have to go for another meeting. And I also like to thank the participants for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Padojinog. All right. So he has to leave, but let's hear from Doc Rene for your inputs about the question.
Okay, so I have to say that I will not be very specific with an answer. Maybe my answer will be vague. As I have said earlier, I am currently based in Abu Dhabi, and so I am familiar with how the United Arab Emirates is responding to the pandemic. And I listened to the news from TFC about what's happening in the Philippines and how the Philippines is responding to the pandemic. I am not an expert in governance, so I'm a little bit nervous about my response. I don't want to make a commentary also because you might not like what I will say. but let me answer that question from a more theoretical perspective. I think that times of change require a certain responsiveness. If organizations or countries, for that matter, are able to respond faster when when their laws or policies allow them to. So my point is that there's a it's a system. It's a system. It's a system. When you look at a country as a system, when you look at an organization as a system, you realize that when you create rules or when you create policies, when you establish policies, they are supposed to serve the purpose of a strategy of the organization or the strategy of a country. And they have to be looked at as a system, systemically, because when you change one part of it, there will be a corresponding effect on the whole. This is vague. But Senj, there's a book by Senj. He focused on systems thinking, and I would like to wish that we can have a more systemic view of governance, so that when policies are created, they consider the impact of such a policy on the whole system, so that instead of just creating policies for the sake of, when you solve one problem, and without really deliberating on the solution, it can actually result to even worse problems for the whole system. So that's uh, yeah. But I think that I'd like to share the optimism of Dr. Winston that eventually, of course, the Philippines is going to overcome, even if it is slower than how the United Arab Emirates is responding to the change here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paquibut. We will have one more last question, but we would like to do a photo op with everyone. If you can turn on your cameras, and I think our staff will take a group shot. Uh, sure. Can you set it up? So if everyone can turn on their cameras.
There you go. So this is the new way of learning. Not only that we are, virtual room, learning each other, but we're also making ourselves be more beautiful and handsome with photos on our screen. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So
Are we
we're
good?
done. Now, I have one last question. This will go for both John and Rene. With the upcoming election, what are the qualities of the leader that we should have? Like a servant leader, a thought leader, a technocrat, or what would be a good leader for us to vote for in the upcoming elections? Let's start with John.
I go first. I was about to say, can I go first? We're always agree that whether you are uh, a thought leader or you're a servant leader, a combination of a servant and thought leader, as we have known it, from the presentation that's been shared to us by, the great speakers. These traits are very essential. And if I were to actually see the next leader of the Philippines and our country, I would like to see, intelligent thought leaders, and at the same time, running the government services with, by thinking beyond himself, of course, but service down to Jeff. Jeff,
All
can you
right.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I think I have a problem with my internet. Let me fix it, and then maybe Rene actually go ahead first.
All right, Rene.
Jeff, you're asking a very difficult question. But of course, to be safe, I'd like to say that I prefer a leader who is both a thought leader and a servant leader. But I wish that the leader, whoever becomes president, can become effective within the context of the system of the Philippines, because of course we have seen many presidents come and go, and we know that the system will need also to be changed. the system, for as long as the system remains the same, I think no matter how good a president is in the Philippines, he will definitely find it hard to lead change unless you change the system. And I'd like to stop there because I don't want to be.
All right. Safe answer. Yeah, let's listen to John.
Well, to me, it's really a combination of being a thought and servant leader. I really want to see our next president to have that philosophy. And by combining thought and servant leadership, you will have the best of both worlds, applying the heart and knowledge in leading others. Especially at this time of crisis, a leader must lead selflessly, right? And intelligently, not just, the common lip service, when you say, I'm a public servant, I serve the public. So, selflessly helping his team, or his people to cope up and to rise up. So something that will really trickle down um, that kind of service, not just to those people that have helped rise up, but also generally to people that really needs the government services. So thought and servant leadership, if you combine them, you will have both worlds of having the heart and knowledge in leading others selflessly and intelligently. I guess it's very self-explanatory, that these two philosophies may not necessarily go together, especially when you see public servant. But I just hope and continue to pray that the systems will also be adjusted to be able to reflect that.
All right. Thank you very much, John. This brings to an end our session on the Brave New World Playbook, Leading Self and Others. We'd like to thank our speakers, Dr. Winston Padojinog, Dr. Rene Paquibut, and Vice President Leni Robredo for their wisdom and insight. We hope you will check out our website, premierleadershipinstitute.com. This has been your host, Jefferson Tew, wishing you a good day.
To sustain business growth across generation,
To inspire, influence, and connect family businesses and professionals.
The concept of family business has evolved, has been studied, has been sparked